Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Félix Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo. I would also like to acknowledge the presence on the floor with them of the UNDP's Director of the Regional Bureau for Africa, UNDP, and Undersecretary General, Ms. Ahuna Ezekionwa. Thank you so very much. Good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests. Welcome to this special gathering on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Towards a fair carbon market for Africa is an important event convened by His Excellency Félix Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, in partnership with the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. Our goal today here is simple: to amplify the African voice on the global stage on the very urgent need to ensure a fair and equitable carbon pricing for African countries. We want to make sure the world understands the critical need for a floor price per ton of carbon credit in the 3 large forest basins. A fair price would reduce the unjustified gap between carbon pricing in the West and in Africa. This is not just, ladies and gentlemen, a mere issue of going green. It's a crucial development imperative. Financing, as you know, remains a huge challenge for African countries working to address the climate crisis. So we're here today to talk about how do we even begin to address the issue of financing? How do we make a dent in the climate crisis when the costs seem so staggering? Well, one area that we'll be discussing today is, of course, carbon markets, which have been identified as a practical financing option for Africa. But African countries, of course, as with many other issues, are not near to getting what they deserve when it comes to carbon pricing, and that's despite the immense wealth of forest resources and green basins. And part of the problem is that there's no single carbon market price, which often leaves African countries at a disadvantage, as you know. So what we're hoping today, and that this event will achieve, is help us highlight the need to build consensus on a set of general principles that will shape Africa's access to carbon markets and equitable prices. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for our first keynote address, it's my honor to welcome the convener of this event, His Excellency Félix Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Pour notre premier discours d'ouverture, j'ai l'honneur d'accueillir Son Excellence, Monsieur Félix Tshisekedi, Président de la République démocratique du Congo. Monsieur le Président, vous avez la parole.
Excellence, Monsieur Denis Sassou Nguesso, Président de la République du Congo. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des États, Monsieur l'administrateur du Programme des Nations Unies pour le développement, ici représenté, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs de délégation et représentation des organisations du système des Nations Unies, distingués invités, Mesdames et Messieurs, il me revient avant toute chose de vous remercier d'avoir rehaussé de votre présence cet événement et particulièrement Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président Denis Sassou Nguesso, que je félicite au passage pour son rôle de premier plan dans la gestion des forêts du bassin du Congo et qui aura le privilège d'accueillir sur ces terres, en octobre prochain, le sommet Amazonie, Congo, Bornéo, Mekong, Asie du Sud-Est, des 3 bassins, des écosystèmes de biodiversité et des forêts tropicales lequel sommet nous permettra, en tant que leaders mondiaux des forêts, de nous exprimer d'une seule et même voix. J'aimerais également adresser mes sincères remerciements à l'Organisation des Nations Unies, à travers le Programme des Nations Unies pour le développement, le PNUD, notre principal partenaire aux assises de ce jour. Mesdames et messieurs, distingués invités, je ne pourrais poursuivre mon propos sans m'appesantir sur les événements malheureux enregistrés il y a peu des suites du dérèglement climatique dont les effets dévastateurs ont eu à affecter des régions jusqu'ici épargnées et ont causé de nombreuses pertes en vies humaines, telles qu'à Calais, dans la province du Sud Kivu, en République démocratique du Congo, au Malawi, au Mozambique notamment, et plus récemment dans la région septentrionale du continent africain où le Maroc et la Libye déplorent à ce jour de nombreux décès en sus des dégâts conséquents, des dégâts matériels. Je voudrais réitérer mon soutien au peuple frère meurtri par ces catastrophes naturelles et la peine insoutenable des familles endeuillées nous oblige, lors de rencontres telles que celle-ci, de considérer l'importance cruciale de nos décisions et de nos engagements sur le vécu de nos populations respectives. À cet égard, je voudrais vous prier de vous lever et d'observer un petit moment de recueillement en mémoire des victimes. Je vous remercie. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, les perturbations climatiques constituent de nos jours une pandémie écologique aux conséquences désastreuses. Ce n'est un secret pour personne que l'action humaine reste à la base de ces changements climatiques qui nous imposent la sécheresse ou les inondations aux conséquences écologiques, économiques et socio-sanitaires lamentables. La planète Terre, notre patrimoine commun, est, comme vous le savez, en danger. À cet effet, sous mon leadership, mon pays s'est résolument engagé dans la voie diplomatique pour concilier nos intérêts communs, à savoir lutter contre le changement climatique et assurer un développement économique durable et harmonieux. Il y a donc d'un côté l'urgence de maintenir l'augmentation de la température en dessous de 1,5 degré Celsius, tel que fixé par l'accord de Paris, un objectif qui devrait nous mobiliser tous, pays émetteurs et non émetteurs, et il y a de l'autre la nécessité de garantir aux populations locales des alternatives sérieuses de nature à assurer leur stabilisation et leur survie. L'atteinte des agendas 2030, notamment ceux des objectifs de développement de l'accord de Paris et de l'agenda 30x30, trouve en République démocratique du Congo une réponse commune dans la mise en œuvre de solutions climatiques basées sur la nature. Plus de 70 millions de Congolais vivent en milieux ruraux et pour lesquels les principales activités relèvent des domaines de l'agriculture et de la foresterie. Fort malheureusement, les modes de production ruraux entraînent des dégradations environnementales très importantes. Mon pays perd chaque année près d'1 million d'hectares de forêts tropicales, dont 500 000 hectares de forêts primaires, véritable coffre-fort à carbone séquestrant plus de 500 tonnes de CO2 à l'hectare. Le principal défi à l'atteinte de nos engagements pays dans les agendas auxquels nous avons souscrit demeure l'accès au financement efficace et souple. À ce propos, le sommet sur le climat qui s'est tenu à Nairobi nous a offert l'opportunité d'une déclaration commune. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, le développement a toujours été la résultante de la transformation des défis existentiels en opportunités de croissance. C'est l'esprit et la lettre de la nouvelle économie du climat. L'article 6 de l'accord de Paris nous offre une opportunité d'innover notre partenariat pour adresser les défis communs de la survie de l'humanité, même si les pays africains, qui sont les moins responsables du désastre climatique actuel, en sont les plus victimes. Il s'agit de capitaliser les échanges des unités de réduction des émissions, autrement appelées crédits carbone, pour financer des projets performants, des solutions climatiques basées sur la nature à bénéfice multiples pour la biodiversité et la population. Ce partenariat gagnant-gagnant pourrait s'articuler sur 3 objectifs. Le premier, mettre en place des contrats de coopération volontaire d'échange au terme de l'article 6.2 pour garantir la fongibilité de nos crédits carbone sur les marchés réglementés. Au point 2, garantir les contrats d'achat à prix plancher incitatif pour accélérer le financement de la nature et soutenir à prix compétitif vos objectifs de neutralité au terme de l'article 6.4. Enfin, troisième objectif, diversifier les investissements vers notre pays au-delà des mines, notamment dans l'agriculture durable, l'énergie verte et les industries de transformation des produits agricoles et forestiers, des villes vertes qui seront portées par des infrastructures ambitieuses et résilientes aux impacts de changement climatique. Arriver à ce paradigme nécessitera une forte coopération économique d'intérêt partagé entre pays du Nord et ceux du Sud. S'il est clairement démontré que la lutte climatique est une responsabilité commune, l'obligation d'équité dans le financement relève sans nul doute de la volonté et de la responsabilité des pays industrialisés. De ce fait, il est incompréhensible de voir des compagnies et même des gouvernements des pays du Nord investir des milliards de dollars, jusqu'à 400 $ la tonne CO2, dans des pompes artificielles de carbone, mais consacrer à peine 5 $ par tonne CO2 pour la conservation des forêts tropicales, qui sont des pompes à carbone naturelles à multiples bénéfices pour l'homme et pour la nature. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, consécutivement aux engagements pris lors de la COP26, à savoir de stopper et inverser la courbe de la déforestation, mon pays vient de prendre une décision ambitieuse et s'engage pour sa part à sanctuariser 15% de son territoire national, soit 323 623 km², pour la conservation de la biodiversité. Conformément à l'objectif 30 x 30, adopté à la COP15 de la biodiversité, mon pays doit atteindre d'ici 2030 plus de 70 millions d'hectares de zones de conservation de la biodiversité, dont 30 millions de conservation communautaire. Cette zone intègre 30 gigatonnes de réserves de CO2, des tourbières, écosystèmes à haute valeur climatique. Le verdissement de l'économie rurale, dont dépendent près de 80 millions de Congolais, constitue le cœur de notre action. Vous avez ici l'expression d'une ferme volonté politique qui offre aux investisseurs la plus grosse opportunité au monde d'investissement carbone et biodiversité dont profiteront plus de 100 millions d'habitants, tout en garantissant la sécurité alimentaire du continent africain et bien au-delà du continent africain. Afin de rendre des investissements sécurisés, souples et efficaces, la République démocratique du Congo vient de procéder à la création d'un fonds d'investissement pour la nouvelle économie du climat, un véhicule à capitaux et à gouvernance mixte, alimenté par un pourcentage de transactions réalisées dans les crédits carbone et les fonds des partenaires extérieurs tels que l'enveloppe pays au sein du FCLP, le Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, la République démocratique du Congo est résolument engagée à faire partie de la solution au changement climatique, tout en étant avant tout une solution pour ses populations. Je vous convie à investir massivement dans le riche capital naturel de notre pays pour le salut de l'humanité et une prospérité partagée. Je vous remercie.
Merci pour votre engagement. Nous vous remercions de nous avoir tous réunis ici aujourd'hui pour cet événement. Et nous apprécions bien évidemment vos efforts extraordinaires pour donner à l'Afrique l'accès à un marché équitable du carbone. Merci une fois de plus, Monsieur le Président. Et j'aimerais également remercier Son Excellence Denis Sassou Nguesso, Président de la République du Congo et Président de la Commission climat du bassin du Congo, pour sa présence ici parmi nous aujourd'hui et pour son soutien. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Okay, I'm going to switch to English now. And I'd like to invite to the stage Ms. Stephanie Mbongo, the Democratic Republic of Congo Special Envoy for a New Climate Economy, to set the scene for us before we get into our panel discussions.
Mote, this is the way we say hello in the two Congos. So if I say mote, you say mote. Mote.
Mote.
So thank you very much for coming. I just want to contextualize. I'm very thankful and honored to have two presidents of the two Congo that we share two languages, two cultures, and also the Congo Basin Initiative. We have the two presidents here. They're not here for them. If they are here, it's because of those children. This is Serena. Serena, she's my third daughter. She's a investor on carbon credit, as climate fund, as minister for that. Our decision, what we are doing here, it's not about the next generation. Your present is very important because we have something to tell to those kids. What we are doing now for them. Because our decision, what we are doing, our behavior, we define their next, their future. So we have to contextualize here. The DRC, as a leader of climate and new climate economy, is giving us opportunity. Thus, fighting against climate change is not a challenge. It's become an opportunity of new technology, of business, of win-win situation. So we are not here to yell of the spelling make of the engagement, where yet never done so far. We are giving you here opportunities. And I'm very thankful that we have CEOs from many states many of them took their private jet to carry here this morning to assist to this. They also make some pollution, but it's okay. We can understand. If they could really, if now they could engage themselves to buy carbon credits from Congo Basin because of the private jet they pollute, that's why they're coming here. So that's really a good news for you. And then I would like to contextualize. The debate here will be policymaker that will make the debate. And then after the policymaker, we have all the outstanding private sector really and philanthropic organizations who are really committed to the climate change. And we are very thankful, and the DRC did its part. Now it's your floor. We give you your offer. You're gonna decide today how to engage for you and also for those children. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Stéphanie Bongo. Merci, and a very powerful message from the DRC Special Envoy there. Our decisions and our behavior today impacts the next generation, our children, so we need to act. Thank you very much. Now, before we move on to our panelists, just a few remarks from a number of people who are here supporting this very important initiative launched by the Democratic Republic of Congo's president. I'd like to call on first His Excellency Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy, the Honorable Edmondo Cirielli. Hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Presidents, first of all, I would like to thank President Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Sassou Nguesso Republic of Congo for organizing this interesting event and for inviting President Meloni, whom I represent today. Italy is a country that has a vocation to act as a bridge between Europe and Africa for its history and its geography. The Italian government believes that it's time to start a new type of partnership with the countries of the African continent, equal based on the pursuit of common interests and aim of creating opportunities for sustainable growth that allow young Africans to contribute to well-being of their countries, rather than venturing on illegal migratory channels. This partnership, which will be presented at the Italy-Africa Summit scheduled in Rome for the 5th and 6th November, will be inspired by the figure of Enrico Mattei, commander of the Italian resistance and historic president of Eni, the public hydrocarbon company. With his vision, Mattei, already in the 50s of the last century, was the promoter of balanced and equal relationship with the producing countries, anticipating the current request of change by decades. For this reason, our government has created an Italy Climate Fund of €1 billion per year. The fight against climate change is one of the common challenges we face. The Democratic Republic of Congo and the Republic of Congo preserve on their territory a significant forest heritage and are holders of innovative solutions. Italy is here to listen carefully to your proposal, reflect on them, and decide how to properly enhance them in various international forums in which we participate, from the European Union on the G7 and G20. Thank you very much.
Thanks to the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy for his remarks and his support. Thank you very much. I'd like to call on next the Honorable Arlette Soudan Nono, Minister of Tourism and Environment of the Republic of Congo.
Hello everybody. I prefer to speak French. Déjà pour saluer les deux chefs d'État, c'est tout un honneur de parler en votre présence. messieurs les chefs d'État de la République démocratique du Congo et monsieur le président de la République du Congo, président de la commission climatique du bassin du Congo, qui est mon chef d'État. J'aimerais également corriger l'un des aspects de ma présentation. Je suis ministre de l'Environnement, du Développement durable et du bassin du Congo. Mais j'ai une double casquette, j'assure également la coordination de la commission climatique du bassin du Congo, qui est une institution de l'Union africaine dont vous entendez depuis tout à l'heure présenter le président de la République du Congo avec cette double casquette. Nous sommes 16 pays portant le bassin du Congo avec la République démocratique du Congo, d'où la présence du président Sassou Nguesso pour porter sa caution, son soutien à ce mastodonte qui est la République démocratique du Congo, qu'on ne présente plus dans le bassin du Congo. Nous soutenons bien entendu cette initiative qu'a rappelé Stéphanie tout à l'heure, celle qui consiste à aller vers un crédit carbone, même je pense que le président Tshisekedi l'a dit dans son propos d'introduction. Nous voulons avoir un crédit carbone équitable. Pourquoi? Mais parce que le bassin du Congo, lorsque l'on parle du bassin du Congo, vous connaissez les forêts qui séquestrent à elles seules pas moins de 1,5 milliard de tonnes de CO2. Mais nous avons également ce que venait de rappeler le président Tshisekedi tout à l'heure, les tourbières, ce qu'on dit en anglais les peatlands. Et la différence entre les écosystèmes forestiers et les tourbières, c'est que les tourbières stockent pas moins de 31 milliards de tonnes de CO2. C'est l'équivalent de 3 à 4 années d'émissions de gaz à effet de serre. C'est pas moi qui le dis, ce sont les scientifiques du Tchèque qui ont fait récemment encore une publication. Donc nous devenons là ce qu'on appelle le rempart de l'humanité en matière justement des équilibres climatiques. Lorsque l'accord de Paris préconise le maintien de notre température, de notre climat à 1,5 degré Celsius, mais pour maintenir ce climat, il nous faut préserver ces tourbières du bassin du Congo, parce qu'en cas d'exploitation, même durable, nous basculons de 3 à 4 degrés Celsius. Donc vous comprenez que lorsque nous rendons ce qu'on appelle ce service écosystémique au reste de la planète, nous sommes donc de bons élèves de l'atténuation, nous n'émettons pas beaucoup. Et donc nous voulons là avoir des fonds d'adaptation pour aller vers une transition énergétique. D'où l'équitabilité de mettre en place ce que nous-mêmes, l'engagement que nous avons nous-mêmes pris, je vous le rappelle, l'accord de Paris. L'article 5 de l'accord de Paris nous fait obligation de maintenir notre réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Nous sommes de bons élèves, vous l'avez compris. Mais sauf qu'il y a un verrou, l'article 6.2 de l'accord de Paris, qui porte sur le crédit carbone souverain. Parce que là, nous sommes dans un marché qui est dérégulé, vous le savez, le marché est volontaire, 5 à 10 dollars la tonne. Nous avons besoin d'aller vers un développement durable, intégral, une transition écologique, une transition énergétique, parce qu'on ne peut pas se développer sans énergie. Nous avons besoin d'une agriculture qui doit être résiliente au climat, mais pour cela demande des fonds. Et particulièrement, nous avons besoin de financement pour l'objectif de développement durable numéro 3, celui qui porte sur l'éradication de la pauvreté, parce qu'au centre, nous avons des populations. Et vous comprenez pourquoi nous devons aller vers un marché régulé. Et dans les conclusions de Nairobi, nous avons porté également, les 54 États africains, portant également ce marché carbone que nous voulons souverain. Et je vous rassure, nous parlons d'une tonne que nous voulons à 30 dollars, à 70 dollars pour commencer, parce que je vous rappelle que les pays de l'OCDE portent déjà la tonne à 120 dollars à ce jour. Et nous sommes tous pays partis de l'accord de Paris. Et donc nous disons simplement, nous tendons la main au reste du monde, aux pays du Nord, aux partenaires techniques et financiers, de nous accompagner. Je vois la directrice générale Afrique du PNUD, qui est là, que je salue, Aruna. Et nous allons abriter justement avec le PNUD à Brazzaville, le 26, 27 et 28 prochain, ce que le président Tshisekedi également l'a dit dans son propos, dès son ouverture de propos, le sommet des 3 écosystèmes forestiers et de biodiversité mondiaux, et à savoir l'Amazonie, le Bornéo-Mekong de l'Asie du Sud-Est et le bassin du Congo. Vous êtes bien entendu, pour ceux qui recevront le sésame d'invitation signé par le chef d'État, mais pour le commun des mortels que nous sommes, nous avons bien entendu un site internet avec des inscriptions en ligne. Vous êtes donc les bienvenus, parce que nous sommes condamnés à œuvrer ensemble. Il n'y a pas de planète commune et il n'y a pas un peuple qui doit serrer la ceinture pour que d'autres respirent. Il y a simplement des populations qui ont besoin d'une économie circulaire que nous voulons lever pour tous être à égalité. Voilà à peu près ce que, au nom de la République du Congo, avec l'autorisation du président Félix Tshisekedi, qui m'a autorisé à prendre la parole, je pouvais donc prononcer comme propos, tout en saluant bien entendu le leadership du président Tshisekedi de la République du Congo, qui est soutenu bien entendu avec celui qu'on ne présente plus, cet écologiste chevrier qui est le président de Sassou Nguesso, qui porte ce bâton de terrain depuis Rio +20 et qui nous a fait l'honneur d'être présent parmi nous, tout en vous remerciant encore une fois de plus. Merci.
Et je m'excuse, Madame la Ministre, pour votre titre. Pardonnez-moi. Merci. Je voudrais à présent appeler la vice-première ministre de la République démocratique du Congo et ministre de l'Environnement et du Développement durable, son Excellence Yves Bazaïba, à nous rejoindre.
Merci. Avec l'autorisation de son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République démocratique du Congo, le Président Félix Tshisekedi, je crois qu'il avait tout dit. Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République du Congo, je voudrais ici seulement mettre l'accent au niveau du gouvernement pour dire que si la RDC avait été longtemps, environ 2 décennies, en dehors du processus climatique, aujourd'hui, nous avions fait notre comeback dans le milieu du climat depuis la COP26 et il est de notre autorité publique aujourd'hui que la RDC est le pays solution face à la lutte contre le réchauffement climatique. Et la RDC l'a fait non seulement en termes de discours, mais dans les concrets. Nous nous sommes organisés, vous avez entendu la déclinaison des actions par rapport à la lutte contre le réchauffement climatique tel qu'elle a présenté le chef de l'État, le président de la République démocratique du Congo, mais je voudrais aussi souligner qu'il y a eu modification du cadre légal et institutionnel qui va accueillir donc le marché des crédits carbone. Aujourd'hui, nous avons l'autorité de régulation du marché des crédits carbone, dont l'ordonnance a été publiée, celle de modifier le principe fondamental de la protection de l'environnement avec d'autres engagements. Et aujourd'hui, dans peu de jours, nous allons présenter les rapports de la vision du chef de l'État qui s'est mué en programme du gouvernement de la plantation de 1 milliard d'arbres jusqu'à 2023 où nous en sommes. Tout ça, ça fait partie des activités pour montrer combien la République démocratique du Congo est préoccupée par la problématique du climat. Notre préoccupation, c'est par rapport au potentiel. La République démocratique du Congo, ça signifie 62% au sein du bassin du Congo. Le bassin du Congo qui a un couvert forestier de 268 millions de kilomètres d'hectares plutôt de forêts tropicales humides et nous en sommes à 155 000 km², donc 62%. La République démocratique du Congo, c'est aussi 10% des réserves mondiales des eaux douces, c'est aussi 52% des eaux douces du monde entier. La République démocratique du Congo, mesdames et messieurs, c'est aussi les minéraux critiques ou les minéraux stratégiques qui vont amener le monde aujourd'hui à aller vers la transition énergétique. Nous parlons tous en termes de maintenir la température planétaire à 1,5 degrés Celsius. Ça signifie que nous puissions décarboniser notre économie. Et la meilleure façon de le faire aujourd'hui, par rapport à l'industrie de l'automobile, par exemple, c'est d'aller vers le véhicule électrique qui ne pollue plus. Alors, pour atteindre ces objectifs, il faut aller vers la République démocratique du Congo, où vous avez la capacité d'avoir les intrants pour les batteries électriques et pour tout ce que nous appelons les smart cars. C'est pourquoi, au nom du président de la République démocratique du Congo et du gouvernement congolais, vous nous avez entendu dire désormais, dorénavant, tout ce qu'il y a comme ressources naturelles de la République démocratique du Congo vont être non seulement exploitées, mais transformées aussi localement pour nous permettre d'accéder facilement à cette transition énergétique pour que nous ne soyons pas en dehors. Donc je termine par dire que le potentiel environnemental de la République démocratique du Congo nous ramène dans une responsabilité. Cette responsabilité face au réchauffement climatique, nous ne polluons pas, nous ne pouvons pas dire parce que nous ne polluons pas, nous n'allons pas nous engager à la lutte contre la pollution. La responsabilité, elle est commune, mais elle est différenciée. C'est l'occasion pour nous de rappeler à tous les engagements, de mettre la main dans la poche des pays industrialisés qui sont responsables de 80% des pollutions dans le monde. C'est le G20, on ne le dira jamais assez. Et 16 autres pourcents, c'est la responsabilité des pays intermédiaires. Eh bien, nous leur demandons que le fonds qu'ils vont mettre dans la lutte contre le réchauffement climatique ne constitue pas des dons. Nous sommes en train de quitter progressivement de l'aide humanitaire aux dons vers un partenariat gagnant-gagnant. Ce n'est pas moi qui l'ai dit, c'est le monde entier qui l'a accepté dans les ODD, les SDG, les objectifs de développement durable, et les 17e objectif parle donc de la coopération ou les relations gagnantes-gagnantes dans la lutte contre le réchauffement climatique. Voilà, mesdames et messieurs, ce que j'avais à ajouter. Bienvenue à la République démocratique du Congo, c'est couvert pour ce qui va vous offrir donc le marché des crédits carbone et dont les fonds iront tout droit vers l'infrastructure sociale pour le développement durable. Nous sommes dans la durabilité, ce n'est pas l'aide humanitaire ou des actions sporadiques qui vont développer les États, mais c'est plutôt la durabilité. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la ministre, pour la vice-ministre et ministre de l'Environnement et du Développement. Sassou doit malheureusement nous quitter. Merci beaucoup pour votre présence et peut-être une photo de famille avant son départ. Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Mais il y a quelqu'un qui monte. Je peux amener ma petite fille ici. Serena, viens, comment?
Can I ask you all to look at me for 1 second? Thank you so much.
Attention, Madame Stéphanie.
Sorry, that's why I'm taking my boss here.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci à tous. Merci, Monsieur le Président Sassou. Merci à tous. We thank the President of the Republic of Congo and his presence today for taking the time to spend this morning with us on this important issue. Thank you very much once again. We are now going to get into the thick of things, delve deeper into this issue, and our high-level panel discussion as we continue to raise awareness about the need for a fair carbon price that will reduce the unreasonable gaps between Africa and other regions. So let me now introduce our distinguished panelists to you. We have with us Christine Schulz, Director General of the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF. Welcome. Also with us, Kelly Kazer from the Bezos Earth Funds. Oliver Danville, Manager of African Carbon Markets Initiatives, ACME, which is the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. Andreas Dahl Jorgensen, Director of the International Climate and Forest for Norway. And I think I have everyone, right? Did I get them? Yes, Moriane Maguires. Am I pronouncing your name right? Close. Thank you so much, Marianne. Head of Environmental Strategy an advisory at Heartspring. Thank you so very much, and thank you for your patience. And Ahuna from UNDP Africa is still with us, of course, as is His Excellency President Tshisekedi. Now, so let's get into the conversation. Maybe I will start with you, Christine. And what do you make of what you've heard so far this morning? And what is your reaction to this request for a floor price by many governments?
Thank you very much, and thank you also for inviting me to be on this panel. I mean, let me start by congratulating His Excellency the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo on launching this initiative and of bringing this group of people together. I really think it's a unique moment in time, because as WWF, we've been working in the Congo Basin, and particularly also in the Democratic Republic of Congo, for 40 years. 4 decades of work on conservation, on doing exactly what we're trying to do here today, which is to conserve one of the world's most important tropical forests in the world. And we've been there because, of course, as WWF, we're trying to conserve some really important species for mankind, some of the biggest herds of forest elephants, chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and so forth, but also because of the people who live in these basins. And it's a really, really important part of the world that we've been trying to conserve. So hugely important, I think, what we're doing here today. What makes it unique is that Congo Basin, I mean, a lot of attention has been placed on other basins of the world. Let me start by talking about the Amazon Basin. Lots of investments have gone into that, lots of conservation activities. But only about 4% of the investments that have gone into the Amazon in Southeast Asia have actually gone into Congo Basin, which is crazy when you think about it. When you think about the immense size of Congo Basin, and particularly Democratic Republic of Congo. So the urgency to move financing into the Congo Basin, and especially DRC, is hugely important for everybody. I wanted to highlight one important thing if we're talking about fair carbon markets. If we're really serious about doing that, we have to make sure that we have good quality supply of carbon projects and programs, but also high integrity demand of the investments that go into there. When we talk about good quality supply of projects and programs, it means that we have to ensure that the money that flows into the Congo Basin reaches the communities, the local communities who live and work in these places. And that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that we have to ensure if we want to make sure that we're successful in reaching the communities. We have to make sure that there's equal benefit sharing between all the communities, and that the money actually reaches the people. And WWF, being positioned on the ground with a lot of civil society organizations, I think is committed to make sure that we do that we build the right kind of mechanisms in place to ensure that the right incentives reach the right people.
Yeah, that's a very important point you make, that money reaches the people that need it the most, right? Let me come to you, Morian, if I can, and what do you think are the priorities, perhaps the top priority in ensuring a fair carbon market?
Absolutely, thank you. And thank you again to everyone for having us. Un grand merci, Monsieur le Président et tous les organisateurs. For us, look, with Hearttree, and we are representing the private sector here, so it's immensely powerful and encouraging to see the multi-stakeholder group assembles here, to have the governments on board, the financial institutions, the foundations. I inevitably have the enviable task of bringing in a bit more of that private sector perspective and that market perspective, as we are a trading and financial services firm. And so what's really key here for the priority to ensure that price is really looking actually at the demand side of the equation, because the reality of markets is that you always have to come to that fundamental of supply and demand. And when we look at the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the supply side potential is abundantly clear, and I don't need to opine on that. To really get to that floor price, to get to the level of 100 euros or dollars per ton, as opposed to what you're seeing now, especially in the voluntary carbon markets, you really need to understand demand. And that means understanding what your customers are ultimately looking to do. So in a voluntary market context today, where a lot of corporates have come under increasing pressure, scrutiny, they're really looking for a degree of transparency and visibility at the project and ground level so that they can do their due diligence. Which means that inevitably, to supply into that market, we need to help countries, governments, and market participants set up the mechanisms to do that. That means, really strong data monitoring, accountability, verification. It means setting up the policies and frameworks so that people can understand outside the context of the country, what do those revenue flows look like? How is that money going to those local communities? That's going to unlock more value and ensure that these credits become branded high quality and high integrity in the voluntary context. In compliance markets, or an Article 6.4 market mechanism under the Paris Agreement, where governments will hopefully be able to trade with each other, I'm going to do a super quick history lesson here.
Yes, but make it quick, please.
If you go back to looking at, say, for example, the EU ETS as a landmark piece of carbon regulation, and you go back to the Kyoto Protocol, the reason that the CDM market ultimately failed, unfortunately, because there was no cost to issuers to supply. That kept the prices low, it flooded the market, and ultimately resulted in the European climate agenda not being met, and they then disallowed CBRs from the EU ETS, and then ultimately ended the CDM market. What did we learn from that, and how do we avoid that happening again? Again, it comes back to that imperative of the so-called cost, whether that's for the buyer, but also the supplier. And so in the context of a country like the DRC, that cost is not the cost on your supply, but again, it's have you set up the infrastructure? Do we have the systems? Can the countries who are signing 6.2 bilateral agreements or looking to buy under 6.4 trust that the climate agendas are aligned and the sort of transparency is there?
Right. Okay, great. Great point you made there about setting up the mechanisms, right? And maybe I'll put that to Andreas from Norway and the International Climate and Forest. Morian talked about helping countries like the DRC set up these mechanisms. How do we ensure that, and how do we set up that floor price that we've been talking about?
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me, Your Excellency, Mr. President. I'm really delighted to be invited to be here, and it's a very important initiative that you're presenting. I think we have been a long-term, consistent partner of the DRC, and we will continue to be a partner of the DRC in these efforts. Through the Central African Forest Initiative to work towards protecting forests along a number of sectors and initiatives and regional programs. And I think it's really important that the world scales up support for DRC and for the Congo Basin to protect this invaluable rainforest for the country, but also for the region and indeed for the world. When it comes to carbon, I think we put a lot of effort into promoting high integrity carbon markets as NICFI. That involves a lot of work, and I think I just want to say this is an important opportunity. It's not a silver bullet. It's going to require a lot of hard work. Of course, the major work is to protect the forests and reduce emissions, but also to setting up the infrastructure to allow high integrity supply of carbon. And I'd just like to emphasize three things. One is to have a credible monitoring system, and I think that requires a lot of technical work to implement. I think we generally promote national systems for forest monitoring, so that countries own their own data, that they can use it not only to monitor results and verify progress, but also to evaluate the progress of policies. The second is the accounting and the standard, and I think that goes both on the environmental integrity and the social integrity. Environmental integrity, I think it is critical that we are implementing RED the way we agreed under the Climate Convention at a jurisdictional scale, both to avoid leakage between projects, but also to allow for a system that supports the entire effort of the government and the communities. Of course, there could be good carbon projects as part of that, and I know there are a number of project developers here, but I think it's critical for the environmental integrity that it's part of a nested jurisdictional framework. And of course, the social safeguards. The last point was always already talked about, which is the crucial importance of benefit sharing and making sure that those actors on the ground that reduce emissions benefit from it. And there, I think DRC starts from a very has a good opportunity. The biggest driver of deforestation in DRC is driven by poverty, slash and burn agriculture, charcoal, and so on. And there is a lot to build on. Under the Coffee Partnership, there is an effort to build the payments for environmental services scheme. I think that's an opportunity to bring in more funding from that, perhaps initially by philanthropy, but potentially also over time from carbon markets. So I think this is an important opportunity for DRC and of course for other countries. So we are, to your question, favorable of advancing carbon market opportunities and hope that DRC will also benefit from that in the future.
Okay, thank you so much, Andreas. Kelly, your thoughts. What measures do you think should be put in place to make this a fair market?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, I am now at the Bezos Earth Fund, unfortunately, or fortunately. I've been working in carbon markets for some 20 years, so I was actually in the EU when we banned CERs. And it was because of a lack of ambition in our own targets, which made our price fall, and it meant that when we were allowing credits from outside, we had a further price depression. It was that simple, it was economics. And so one of the things I think is needed is really strong and ambitious climate commitments on the demand side. It's not just unlocking demand, it's unlocking demand on the basis of ambition. And that's one of the things we're very much focused on through different initiatives that we fund and different grants that we have. I also think we're very committed to drawing out that demand side and the supply side integrity, both of which, I mean, everybody here has mentioned those things. I think we're equally committed to them, and we're also directing our grant making at building the capacity of local communities to engage in these markets, to better understand them, to get themselves a good deal in terms of benefit sharing. I think all of those things are incredibly important. I think right now what we're seeing is that the sort of pendulum has swung too far in one direction and demand has dried up. I think that there's a greater recognition that we have to drive this private investment, and that carbon markets are a tool that we can use. I mean, private sector investment has to increase by some 700% by 2030. It's not, this is crucial. It's a massive imperative. And so we should use all of the tools in the box, right? There's no tool that should be left behind. We have to find a way to get this investment flowing and find a way for that investment to spur further private capital. We have to address nature in this decade or we're losing the climate fight. So we're very much dedicated to getting the systems and infrastructure right. We're a relatively new philanthropy, and so we're just starting. And we've started on those sort of quality standards for supply, quality standards for demand, building the capacity of communities. And I think one of the things we wanted to get out of today and this week is listening to you all, listening to the people in this room about how you think we can best help and the steps you think that we best need to undertake as philanthropy or as public sector or as private sector. Because I think we have to build these things collaboratively.
Right. Thank you very much, Kelly, for that. Oliver, I'll give you the last word because we're almost running out of time. What do you make of what we've heard this morning, and how do you think the private sector can play a bigger role in ensuring a fair carbon market?
Thank you. Thank you very much, all, and thank you, President, for your leadership in this initiative. I'll keep my comments brief here, but I think just to collect here, we've heard a theme here in terms of what can governments do, what can the private sector do, what can the public sector do in supporting the creation of this market as it develops. The sort of key theme I picked up here, what I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, is indeed building those frameworks in, so we ensure we have an end-to-end high-integrity market, which will ultimately drive up pricing. We see, I don't come from the private sector side, we come from the African Carbon Markets Initiative, but we see indications of the ability and want to pay for a higher price for credits which are deemed to be of higher integrity. On the government side, what does that mean? That means being able to put in place the relevant standards, MRV, etc., to build that capacity. As the African Carbon Markets Initiative, we are supported by three sponsoring partners: the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, Sustainable Energy for All, and the Rockefeller Foundation, with the sort of mission to massively accelerate carbon markets in Africa. 22 million tons was retired from Africa in 2021. The technical potential alone of the Democratic Republic of the Congo is 393 million tons. So we're out to sort of solve that gap, if you like. One of the core pieces we do is facilitate and offer to governments that come to us from expressions of interest to develop a carbon markets policy and frameworks. This includes aligning very clearly an ambition of where we want to take this market. And that includes building the necessary regulations to give clarity to investors, for example, on the fundamentals, how carbon projects are taxed, etc., through to also bridging across to the Article 6 side, where thinking which projects might make eligible for corresponding adjustments and so on. I think building that sort of robust platform within government is the sort of first fundamental step to do. And we're already supporting Mozambique, Malawi, Ghana, Nigeria, Rwanda, and indeed Kenya. Kenya which announced its climate change amendment bill at the Africa Climate Summit. So in full agreement with the panelists here to create a sort of high integrity market on the supply side, which ultimately will go some way towards creating a fair carbon market.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll end on a positive note. Thank you to all of our panelists. Please, a round of applause for our panelists. For a very conversation around the urgent need for a fair market price for carbons and what Africa needs to take advantage of its resources. Thank you once again. And now for our closing remarks, I'd like to call on Ms. Ahuna Kionwa, the Undersecretary General and UNDP's Director of the Regional Bureau for Africa, to give closing remarks. Yes, you can come here.
Thank you, and good afternoon to you all. May I start really by congratulating two President Tshisekedi and President Sassou, not just for launching this event, but for understanding the importance of this issue and climate change in general, to the point that they appointed two women to run the environment ministries, because in Madam Eva and my dear sister, Madam Aled, we see champions for this cause, and they are exactly the voices that we need to keep hearing to take words into action. And I'm really inspired by their energy and their commitment. And I think, Mr. President, you chose really well. Thank you for recognizing this value of making sure that women are not just seen as passive observers of an issue that affects them greatly, but that they can be leaders and solution creators for this problem. Africa's carbon potential has been severally emphasized in this conversation. The real challenge now is to capitalize on it, and what role us as UNDP and other development partners can play to support Africa in this. If you are African in this room, or you consider yourself a friend of Africa, or an international player, and you're not a little bit uncomfortable with the fact that for decades we have witnessed a mismatch between a continent's wealth, natural wealth and endowment, and the condition of its people. If you're not just a little bit uncomfortable about that, you should ask yourselves, why not? This is what we're talking about here today. Climate change comes on top of many injustices that this continent has faced. And what we're talking about here today isn't about aid, charity to Africa, it's about climate justice. And it is, at the core of it is about development. And how we seize the opportunity of a crisis, not waste it, but turn it into an opportunity. And I am convinced that this area of carbon market presents opportunities that we haven't seen in the past. The reason why the exploitation and extraction of Africa's resources has happened over the decades as the continent poor is precisely because we didn't have conversations like this led by Africa. This is the difference. This space is cultivated by Africa's leaders and practitioners so that Africa can assert itself on a matter so important to its existence and to the well-being of its people. When Africa takes the lead, not to say the world come help us and give us the crumbs, but to say, actually, we've got the resources. We host the second lung of the world. The world breathes because of us. And therefore, we're not here debating or negotiating whether Africa should get a little bit of those resources or not. But that there is a stake. Africa has a stake in the game and has to be seen as a leader on this topic, and therefore should be taken seriously. When the leaders of this continent and the people of this continent say we need to look at these issues seriously, it shouldn't be seen as, well, let's see what we can do to help Africa. Africa needs to be taken seriously. Investors need to take the continent seriously. On carbon, by the way, and there's a responsibility for African leaders as well, and governments and the public sector. I was speaking to one president, one leader of a country who said, actually it was a minister, that on her desk right now, piles and piles of documentation of people wanting to look at their carbon stocks and asking for a deal. This is even happening at the subnational level. Speaking to a governor of a state in one country who says, I had investors come to me to say, we would like to deal with you on your carbon stocks. But none of these leaders was prepared. And this is where we come in. Because therein lies the space for exploitation and extraction. That Africa once again risks losing on this market if Africa is not prepared, whether it is with the mechanisms or even with understanding what it has and the value of what it has. Up to this date, we have many African countries with deep carbon sinks who have not even registered, they don't have a registry. They don't even have a certification. And therefore, the pricing continues to disadvantage several of these countries. We have a situation where in some countries, in Europe for instance, what is the price of tar? It's up to $80, I understand, and in the US up to $140. In the case of Africa, in some countries it's lower than $1 of the same commodity. Why is this? This is really the question that we have to ask today. And it isn't just because of the money. Think about this. 800 million people on the African continent, and many of them in the Congo Basin, don't have access to clean cooking. Women are getting their lungs darkened, polluted, because they're cooking with dirty fuel. This is a condition that all of us in this room can contribute to addressing by putting the fair pricing on the continent's carbon. Because that money that is earned can be turned into a facility to end this issue of clean cooking that is actually killing our women and our girls, because they are the most exposed. You talk about energy access. We're still looking at a continent where 600 million people don't have access to electricity. And yet we boast of all these nature-based solutions. Getting a fair pricing on Africa's carbon could provide the critical financial resources, the fiscal space, to address the issue of energy poverty. And when you address energy poverty, you are actually addressing the issue of unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, which should remain a burden for us, because we're talking about a continent that is vastly youthful. Over 70% are considered youth, but with no jobs, with no opportunities. Learning is limited, but even where learning takes place, it doesn't always lead to earning. These are core issues at the heart of the development discourse. But this issue of carbon market isn't just about the market, it isn't just about money. It's about the heart of the matter of sustainable development. And so, Mr. President, I want to congratulate you really for leading on this, because DRC, a country that we know hosts a lot of things that the world needs for a sustainable future, whether it's in terms of the minerals that are going to produce those electric cars and help us decarbonize and get to net zero, or the carbon that we're speaking about today, or indeed the human resources, the talented people that can innovate. The DRC today needs a different narrative. When we think of this country, we think conflict. We think aid, humanitarian aid, displacement, but this is actually a country that has a huge amount of what the world needs to survive, and that's why this conversation isn't just about what we can do to help. It's about how we need to form a coalition that helps us stay in the business of sustaining peace and development, not just for Africa, but for our world. I believe that this is a topic where Africa can lead and is leading. I believe that if you're here and you believe in humanity, this is the train that you need to join. And perhaps my next proposal here, and I'm going out in the limb here because I've never tested this with anyone. As we think about this carbon pricing issue, I was thinking about oil and OPEC. How was that arrived at? Can you think of an OPEC, Mr. President, for carbon? Because first we need to also set the standards for production and for the supply, but also then the price that is internationally recognized. I'm not technical, so I don't know about 6.2 and 6.4, but I just think there has to be a global convergence around a floor where whether you're in Gabon or in South Sudan, you're getting a fair deal for what you have to offer in this area. Thank you.
Thanks once again to His Excellency Félix Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of Congo for organizing this event today with UNDP. Thank you to the UNDP's Africa Director General. Thank you so much to all of our panelists once again. Wishing you an excellent afternoon. Thank you very much.
Merci, monsieur l'ambassadeur, c'était un plaisir. I think the bottom line is the demand is the biggest aspect. C'est une grande. Attention. Hein, je ne l'oublie pas. Amis. Amis. Now I trust in your Ok, merci. Papa, attention. Hey, tu as vu ou pas que c'est? Faut pas na voix pour calmer, à la gîte. Oui.
Donc voilà. Oui. Vous pouvez voir, le président est là, derrière. Nous sommes en direct sur votre chaîne. L'événement a été organisé par la RDC et vous avez suivi les différents intervenants sur le climat, sur le crédit carbone. C'est une grande opportunité pour la RDC de se vendre au niveau de ce marché, des marchés qui étaient méconnus du public congolais. Et aujourd'hui, il faut que le secteur privé puisse s'investir pour avoir part à ces marchés. Voilà, le chef est là, juste derrière. Vous voyez, c'est en direct, nous sommes là. Merci, merci de nous avoir suivis et à très bientôt. Au revoir.